Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted more happiness, peace, and flow in your life, then do we have the All Our Waves Are Water show for you. Today I'll be talking with Jaimal Yogis, the best-selling author of Saltwater Buddha and a fantastic new memoir, All Our Waves Are Water. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about stumbling toward enlightenment and the perfect ride and finding more peace and happiness even in the blender of our journey. That plus we'll talk about the power of country road, Italians in Eduardo, surfing tubes in Mexico, why disberry sad, no problem, what's the importance of yogis fleeing India to avoid spicy food, what on earth is a psychonaut, and what in the world nochi piles wanting to be dumplings has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Jaimal. Are you ready to shine?
I am, Michael.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Before we dive right into things, how did you get your name?
Good question. Yeah, my parents were yogis, sort of trying it out in the 70s in Boston, and stumbled on a teacher named Sanchi, who is a Sikh guru from India, whose teacher's teacher was named Baba Jaimal Singh. And my dad wanted to name me Baba Jaimal, and my mom convinced him to knock the Baba off, but Jaimal stuck. And Yogis is actually our last name. My name looks like Jaimal Yogis, but it's pronounced Jaimal Yogis. And Yogis is a Lithuanian name, but it's just sort of a coincidence that a lot of our family got into yoga.
Very, very cool. So was your life very spiritual in your early years?
My parents were, so my dad was sort of a Reformed Catholic, and my mom was raised Jewish/agnostic, and they both came into the Eastern traditions and got interested in yoga and Buddhism as we were growing up. But my dad was also in the military, and we were military brats, so we would there would be years of more in spirituality where we were going to Paramahansa Yogananda's ashram every Sunday and singing with tabla and harmonium. And then there were years where it was just, football and Sizzler, and we were sort of tuned out from it. But I was exposed to various spiritual traditions as a kid and kind of rebelled against it myself until as I tell the story in Saltwater Buddha, I was getting into a lot of trouble as a teenager and ran away from home to Hawaii, to Maui, I know an island you're familiar with. And being 16 and by myself with very little money turned me toward wanting to do something. And I started to meditate again for the first time sort of on my own, and certainly tapped into some of those lessons that I'd learned as a kid.
What were some of the early experiences you're getting, or what was the shift you were going through once you got to Maui?
It was really it was a call back to sort of my true self. I had been typical American suburbia, was caught in the gyre of high school popularity contest, and I had a lot of great friends I'd grown up with, but I had this sense that I wasn't being my real self, my authentic self, and I was, I'd gotten a DUI, I was on probation for stealing some beer. I wasn't up to anything that most, teenagers are up to, but I seemed to be the one who always got caught. Mm-hmm. And I always wondered if maybe there was an unconscious desire to get caught, because I knew I needed a change. And I guess, you could say the call came to me in the form of dreams. I kept having these dreams of water and, breathing underwater, surfing. And I felt really great. And it was a time where there was so much turmoil in my life that I just used my impulsive teenage brain to buy a one-way ticket to Maui. And all I knew was I needed a change. And the sort of symbolism of freedom that surfing offers was my link to that. And I got there, and as often happens, the sort of symbol of freedom doesn't turn out to be the freeing thing. You need to turn inward. And so when I was in Maui, I was still running into a lot of, obstacles of the turmoil of running away. And I was, trying to figure out where to live and how to sign up for school. And so coming back to meditation, I just knew I needed something. Mm-hmm. And I picked up a little book on mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh at the local Maui health food store, and just started to try to count my breath. And that was my first glimpse at finding peace that wasn't associated with external conditions. Mm-hmm. And really, I suppose I'd sensed that a lot as a kid, but I never really needed it. I never confronted that pain and been responsible for finding peace on the inside myself. And so it was a glimpse and one that, I've continued with today.
Beautiful. So in writing Saltwater Buddha, what was your goal in writing it, and how did the title come about?
Good question. Yeah. Saltwater Buddha sort of found me in a way. I had just gotten out of journalism school, and so after high school, I went and lived in a Buddhist monastery, and I thought I wanted to be a monk, but I ended up not being a monk and going back to school, and ended up being a journalist. So once I was out of journalism school in New York, I was trying to get all my credentials together and was doing a lot of political, environmental stuff, magazine writing. And I felt like I had basically hidden this whole spiritual part of myself. And that felt a little bit okay because I was, it was just my own intimate thing, but it also felt like I was living a lie a little bit. And so I wrote a story about how surfing was my Zen practice in the world, so to speak. Like I could find sort of my Zen in the storm out there in the water. And I wrote this little piece, and I was terrified to write it because I thought I'm going to get pigeonholed, and what if what if my editors at my magazines don't respect me anymore or something. Wrote it. It turned out it was the most popular piece I think I've ever written, and it went viral and got republished in a bunch of places. Hey, it's good to have written something from the heart and have it be and see that it has other people have the same experience. Other people relate to it. And so around the third or fourth time a magazine republished it, they said, "Do you want anything in your bio? Because we can't give you any money." And I said, "Well, why don't you say I'm writing a book about Zen and surfing?" And literally a week later, a publisher called and said, "We'd like to publish that book." And I wrote the book not knowing the title. The idea that our Buddha nature is sort of the underlying the water that connects all waves, like our sort of idea of self or separate self is a wave, and our true nature is something more expansive and connected, came to me, and Saltwater Buddha just popped in. And a lot of people thought I was explaining like myself as the Saltwater Buddha, and that wasn't really my intention at all, although as I've gone, I've developed that nickname.
Very, very cool. So you wrote this book. Things are starting to stick for you. Actually, let's back up. You wrote the book. You submitted the book. You got money for the book. And then you freaked out and tried to pull the book back to give them something else.
Right. Yeah. You know this story because you recently read All Our Waves Are Water, where I talk about the freakout session of submitting Saltwater Buddha. Went into a kind of period where I went because I got a small advance first book, and I wanted to take a break from journalism to write the book. I went and lived on a sailboat in Sausalito, my girlfriend's dad's sailboat, paid about $100 a month rent, and just kind of tried to meditate. And I wrote something that was really from the heart and from my experience, and then submitted it and proceeded to completely feel so exposed and vulnerable that I wanted to take it back, basically. So I basically did take it back. I told the publisher, I just want to make some slight tweaks. And I went and rewrote most of it. And I rewrote it in a way where I was basically trying to escape the authenticity and write it to, what I thought might be more approved by some of literary peers, what have you. They got the book and said, this isn't one, or it's not as good. And I rebelled and said, I'm not going to write. I'm not going to publish it then. And I went through basically this period of months where I wasn't going to come out with the book. It turned out that I had to sort of, I had to shelve it completely and then come back to the book and read it as if I was picking it up and it wasn't me, and see what the story was. And because I had, as often happens, it's scary to be your author. And that was my first time really putting that out to the world in a major way that could shift my life. And I just had to sort of go through a dark night of the soul about it. But when I did finally read it, as if I was picking it up and just saying, hey, what if I was going by a bookstore, picked this up and started reading it? And I could see that there was something, it might not win a Pulitzer Prize, but there was something powerful and authentic about it. And so I had a new relationship with it, and I went for it.
Woohoo! There's so many directions we could take this. What's fascinating to me is I'm seeing in your journey, and I'm seeing in your book, something that we're all faced with, which is a struggle with our own authenticity and really living our true lives. And it sounds like this was represented right in the submission of the book.
It was, and I think it, we have this deep desire to be loved, and ultimately we'd like to be loved for our authentic self, but it's scary to put that self out there, I think, almost because if that self gets rejected, it's like, well, what then? So I think we often put on masks, and for me, to some extent, trying to fit into this very, I went to a prestigious journalism school, and I really wanted those credentials, and then I wanted to be loved and accepted by my peers in journalism, and it is a great love of mine to just take in knowledge and the sort of pillar of democracy that journalism is. But there's this rift with, where oftentimes, or there's it's really a myth that you can't, that if you have a spiritual life, you're sort of not taken seriously as an intellectual. At least that was my feeling, that I couldn't have both of these. I couldn't be honest about my spiritual life and also be respected by this field of intellectuals and this school that I'd gone to and these expectations that I had. And when I did finally come out with the book and I was sort of ready for blowback, nothing happened. It was like the blowback never came, where all of a sudden, I couldn't write for those publications that that were, quote unquote, in the mainstream. It was just sort of like, oh, well, here I am. I've presented my heart on a platter to the world, and I'm ready for the blowback. And it just never came. And I think the reason is that, we all have a very rich inner life where we're contemplating big questions, and we have big emotions, and we sense a bigger reality, and people put it into different language. Like we're sort of isolated, like I'm the only one who feels this connection to something deeper, so I can't talk about it, or maybe I can just talk about it in my church or whatever. and it's generally just untrue. What I find is the more I am authentic, the more other people open up and say, "Oh my God, I've had that exact experience," and then all of a sudden, you're this person that you might have thought not have been escaping that box or had some preconceived notions, you open up to in a new way. And but it's scary, and there's so many layers of it. There's so many layers of the mask that we've put on to fit into various aspects of life that it's sort of an ongoing process figuring out your authentic self.
And I want to dive into your latest book in a minute. We're not going to go there quite yet, but that is through your journey, and this is kind of a next piece of the memoir. You are trying on all of these different suits to see what fits you best. Who is authentic Jaimal? Well, let's try this one on. Let's try the other one on. Let's flee from this one. It's fascinating that you said that you had to step back and read the book as a third person. Because that's another big philosophy in life, and particularly in meditation, and something I believe you've done a lot of, which is to be able to step back and be the observer.
Yeah, it's. I think when you write or create any sort of piece of art, to some extent, you're the vessel, and there's some sort of creation. All there is happening in nature is like sort of this creative energy, and when you are doing it, you're reflecting it through your own unique prism or your thumbprint. But the end result is that there's this other thing out there that's created, and we often become so just like we identify with all the waves of thought that are moving through our head, like, oh, I'm feeling jealousy. Oh, I'm a jealous person. And it's like, oh, I've created this thing and therefore I am this thing. And it's, there clearly is a connection between you and the thing that's created, but there's also sort of a bigger process happening. And so I've found that if I'm able to do that, if I'm able to sort of get out of my own identification process and come to something I've created very intimately and as a third party, I'm able to be less judgmental of it, and I'm able to see it a little more clearly. So when it does need more work and I'm in the editing process, I think I'm able to edit a little bit more clearly. And then also when I put it out there and maybe I have a lot of anxiety around, is the world going to accept it? Coming at it as a third person reader allows me to, I just see it with different eyes. I see it with different eyes. And so I'm sure there's a lot of interesting neuroscience around that paradigm, but that's my experience.
Thank you for sharing. Let's take a few more questions before we dive into the book. First off, what was it like trying to surf Mavericks?
Scary, as you might expect, but
these are what, 30-foot waves? We've got an apartment building coming at you.
You've got an apartment building coming at you, yeah. So this is a wave about a half mile out to sea, cold water, sharks out there. It's just it's a whole world unto itself, and you get out there and you've never seen nature explode sort of like this. You might have seen an avalanche or seen a volcano. It's that in the water where you're just seeing these sort of bombs detonate, and yet they're saltwater. And really, you do go into a sort of war zone mentality where you feel you feel like sort of you're in a foxhole, and you might start. There's both a reverence and awe and a fear at once. And for me, there was, for whatever reason, this pull toward it. I trained. I knew that this was something I wanted to do. And And so it was just an interesting, and I think I had this desire to put myself into extreme fear and see if I couldn't use my own faith, that I needed to be there. And that was something that I sort of a rite of passage for me to get through that really debilitating fear. And the interesting process was that for my first time out there, for about 5 hours, I fought the fear. I thought, because I'm so locked up with fear, I'm not going to be able to surf. And so I kept hesitating, and I would paddle for a wave, and then I would pull back. And as soon as when you're looking over the edge of a 30-foot wave, and it literally goes vertical and then concave, so you're basically peering over the edge of the building, and you're thinking, I'm just going to basically fall 30 feet and then have the whole ocean fall on me. So you keep pulling back, and it has to be total commitment, or you're gonna, just like Point Break, hesitation can cause your worst nightmare. It's true out there. And the interesting thing was fighting the fear, pushing it away, and then finally having this moment where I was so frustrated with the fear that I accepted it. And I said, well, what if I use this fear, which is just an extreme amount of adrenaline in my body, as energy? And what if I sort of turned it into desire, and, just no holds barred commitment? And it was kind of like what you think isn't the meditative approach, this, kind of warrior energy of embracing the fear, accepting it and using that energy to push over. And, that was how I got my first wave. And then, that first experience clues you into the fact that, okay, this is doable. This isn't something that I need to put a wall up where I can't do it too. So, Mavericks is not, and it was interesting. Once that also happened, I also realized that I surfed Mavericks that year. It wasn't something that I had a great craving to keep doing. It was kind of just this experience that some part of me wanted to have. Once I had it, I thought, okay, because there is a lot of danger. There's a lot of danger. It was a fascinating experiment with fear, and one that I come back to on land when there's sort of that kind of desire to get to something that's scaring me.
I call it fear and anxiety is excitement without motion, or without deliberate action pointed toward that goal. Once you start to take action, the fear and anxiety start to dissipate. And in your case, you had to get busy on focusing on the wave.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I love that. There's an incredible power to just getting started, and movement alone lessens fear, but then just taking steps toward a fear, I think the empowerment of that, even if it's a baby step, and oftentimes we need to take lots of positive baby steps toward that fear. It's all of a sudden you're saying, oh, this thing that was keeping me up at night, when I'm moving toward it, that action converts it to what it is, and the label of fear can be removed as a negative, and you're just saying, okay, this is energy in the body that I'm going to use.
Thank you. I like how you said there's a term that's been coming up. I do a lot of automatic writing. It's a book we're writing on that I was trying to make more generic, and I'm getting the same blowback internally that says, no, you have to fully put yourself out there. And if it's down the woo-woo rabbit hole, then you go down the rabbit hole. You have to be your authentic self. But one term that's been coming up is open-hearted warrior. And you were just that. You were open-hearted, let the fear go primal, and go for it.
Yeah, I like that woo-woo rabbit hole term. There is a Buddhist meditation and yoga. There's often, I think, a misconception that, we should be like these even-keeled, peaceful beings all the time. And when you go into like an ashram or a monastery, oftentimes you encounter a lot of passive aggressiveness because everybody's like trying to copy the guru, and they're like, I'm fine,
Oh, no.
and I think it's ultimately not what those teachings are getting at. They're teaching us to accept emotion in a way that has a big container, and not let the emotion run us, but still experience it, right? Not repress it. And yet a lot of those big emotions that you can feel when you when you open yourself in meditation are scary, and you want to repress them and push them away with sort of a new spiritual ego, like I'm above that now because I'm meditating. And that's just the opposite. And I think taking it into an environment with like Mavericks, or frankly writing a book like the one you're doing now, which is is much scarier really than surfing Mavericks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you got to feel those things and see where they go, and because otherwise you end up repressing them into the body, and they'll scream out in other ways. As I've certainly found out through you get a muscle spasm for a few months, and then you finally go to that retreat, and you're realizing that there was an emotion that needed out there that I wasn't honoring, and sometimes that's the open-hearted warrior. Absolutely.
And it's something that you've done in your retreats, and you talk about Vipassana retreat early on, and how that turned into a weeping retreat. And this is something discussed in your latest book, as you were forced to be with yourself and to be there and to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, that was the retreat that I write about in the first few chapters of All Our Waves Are Water, where I had that revelation, because at this point I'd been at this sort of meditative stuff for, 5 or 6 years seriously, since I'd lived in the monastery. And I think when I first entered the Zen monastery, you want to imitate the form of what spiritual looks like. Mm-hmm. And so you're doing, you learn how to sit still for a long time, and you think, okay, I got this down, and then how to look peaceful externally, and you think, okay, I'm doing pretty well. What I didn't realize is that I was sort of learning how to glide above my emotions in something like a passive aggressive way. And that was just what I needed. That was my process. But when I went to India, basically, I'd been with a woman for about 3 years. Long story short, we'd been planning to live in India for a year together. A month before the trip, we break up. She goes to India with another guy who happens to trigger all my insecurities. So I'm just suffering in India. And when I finally forced myself into this Vipassana retreat, I didn't want to be there. I was just all jealousy, pining, anxiety. And at some point, though, the technique of mindfulness, which is just one to observe, accept, finally I had no choice but just to start sobbing and to feel the sadness of the loss. And what was interesting, as I write about in the book, is I thought I was only sad that I'd lost this woman. It turned out that that was really a pointer to the fact that I had about 25 years of unfelt grief laundry, you could say, that needed washing. And so it was just one thing after another. I was like, oh man, there's layers in here from when I was 5, 6, 10. And emotion is interesting like that, where, it becomes little sort of tangled balls, and you peel back one and you realize how they're related, and that's how the brain is built too. These synapses that are connected in extremely complex ways. So, but that's a part of the self-discovery process. process is just feeling through those things. It's the self piece. It's like there's so much richness and clues for then the work that you're able to do creating.
And I love that. I don't know if love's the right word, but that at kind of the end of this India journey, she comes back to you. She's left the other guy, but you've been on such a path of understanding about yourself that you're in very different places now.
That's right. I was positive during my months of pining that the thing that would heal me was getting Sati back. And I mean, nobody could have convinced me that wasn't the case, because I was just clear that she was my soulmate. And yet after, again, going through the retreat process and seeing how peeling back the layers of emotion, and then sobbing, and feeling myself again, once I'd let go of that, feeling that wholeness again, and feeling joy. I mean, feeling joy alone, that joy that comes from the internal. And that's really the stable joy, that I don't think meditation is certainly not the only way to it, but it's one doorway. That when she did come back to visit, we were able to connect in a totally new way as friends. And I really did see that I had created this sort of hologram of this ideal Sati who was like the perfect sort of figurine Sati who would fill that hole in my heart. And she wasn't that. She was a wonderful person, like so many wonderful people, who wasn't the right fit for the long haul at that point. And I could finally see that and be okay with it. And really be open to the unknown. Like, hey, maybe we'll get together, years from now, we don't know, but now's not the right time, and that we can both be happy now where we're at.
Awesome. Let's go from there. Since we're talking about happiness and people, who is the happiest monk in the world?
Well, the guy who clued me into how to relate to emotions was Sonam, and Sonam Wangdu, and he's sort of the spirit animal of this book. I met Sonam shortly after arriving in the Himalayas, where I ended up being for about 5 months in this part of the book and part of my life. And the interesting thing was that Sonam was grieving deeply. He'd come over the Himalaya. He'd hiked over the Himalayas from Tibet when he was 11 to ordain with the Dalai Lama, and he nearly died in the process. Loved being a monk with the Dalai Lama. Had in the process of the Chinese occupation lost his family, lost track of them, and didn't know if they were alive, imprisoned, etc. And was sort of coming into contact when we met with that grief in just a really profound way, where he was sad and wanted to find them. And when you become a monk, you sort of renounce family life, but you can still keep in touch with your parents and stuff and know that they're okay. And he was feeling that. And yet, the thing, I learned this months after knowing him, and all I had gleaned from him in before knowing about his family was that this guy exuded joy. He was just, I wanted to be around him because when I was in this suffering breakup period, he just, being around him made me feel okay. It was like there's just some people who are like that, who it doesn't matter what they're doing or saying, and we could often barely communicate because he didn't speak that great of English. So I'm like, this is the happiest guy ever. And he would often just say it because he didn't have a lot of words in English. He'd just say all day, this walk, Jaimal, make me so happy. This chai make me so happy. And I was like, is this guy is literally the happiest person I know. And then I found out about the deep grief, and it was amazing to me that he was able to hold those together. And that was sort of a clue, a teaching that great sadness or grief doesn't have to be independent of great joy. And it reminded me of that quote from Khalil Gibran that, the deeper you carve into your sorrow, the more joy you can contain. And it was like, Sonam wasn't afraid to feel this grief about his family and to search for them. And it was like he'd carved out this enormous bowl. And so I was lucky to meet him.
One of my favorite lines from the book and from him is, "Why does bury sad? No problem."
Yeah. I like that you connected with that, because that kind of became my mantra in the Himalayas. It happened when I was just cluing into his story, and we were hiking up high, and there was some spring snow left, and Sonam was scooping the snow in his hands, and he was looking at it, and he said, "This India snow, Tibet snow, very same. This many thinking family." And he was shedding tears, and I put my arm around him and I said, "I'm so sorry, Sonam. I'm so sorry that you can't find them right now." And he started to laugh, and he said, "Jama, you funny. This very sad, no problem." And it was like that was so obvious to him that this is just this is part of the beauty here. Is part of the tapestry that we're in all the time. And it was just it comes back to me all the time, this fear, no problem. This sad, no problem.
It also comes back to waves and ocean.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's you go out there to the ocean, and sometimes the surface is choppy, and sometimes ferocious, and sometimes calm, and it's always beautiful. I mean, it really is. And it's our judgment sort of those waves of the mind as like, this one good, this one bad, that this one I'm going to try to shove into a box that can make them lose that sort of awe-striking beauty.
As my other job, I wear my coaching hat. And for the show, I like to always try to coach people or give them advice so that they're not just listening to the show, but they actually take action on it. So in the last few minutes before we do a brief meditation, I have a few quick wrap-up questions. But the first is, what homework would you give people listening to this show, maybe to change their lives or to get more of an idea of this for themselves?
It's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of points that I cover in the book, as you know, but since we've been on the topic of the Openhearted Warrior and feeling our emotions rather than pushing them away, I've been on this theme recently because here I am getting ready for another book tour, and as you know, it's just more vulnerability, more exposure, public exposure, and so there's always a lot of self-judgment. And it's not unique to a book tour, but it can kind of come into focus in that time. And I've really come to, my homework has been doing sort of every time I'm in comparing mode, and we live in such a comparing era because never before have you been able to say, so-and-so got this many likes and I only got this many likes. And, it's like we live in the compare era. And anytime I'm going down that path, I notice that it leads to dissatisfaction. Even when I'm sort of feel like I'm doing better and comparing thank goodness, I have more likes. It's sort of a faulty happiness. And so I just try to catch myself. I'm in comparing mode. This always leads to a sort of dissatisfaction or fragmented mind that I don't really like dwelling in. Okay, notice that that's totally normal. for the human mind to go there. Don't beat yourself up about it. Then come back to accepting yourself now.
Beautiful.
So what would it be like to say, hey, you know what? Nobody's perfect. I've actually done a lot of, work on myself. I'm trying my best to be a good person. I'm just like everyone else. Life's pretty hard. How about I accept myself as I am right now? Because I know that when I do, it feels really good. And that the deeper I can go down that route, the more sort of of natural joy of the moment I have, and the more I can get into a place where I'm in the creative flow, so that I can also produce more of what I'm meant to produce in this time. And so it does two things. So it's just a checklist. Like, okay, in comparing mind, I'm going to accept myself for doing that, and then turn back towards self-acceptance. And I've just been experimenting with it sort of throughout the day, and finding it incredibly helpful, because I think that is the path in a nutshell. The more we can just accept ourselves now, the more we can actually be our authentic self, because it often is confused with like, oh, well, you're accepting yourself, you're not striving, you're not improving. And it's like, well, no, it's just the opposite. When you accept yourself now as you are, you have the space and excitement and energy to do whatever you want to do in the self-improvement space, whether that's learning piano or learning or, finishing your book. It's like you finally have the space to just do it rather than being in the judging, comparing mind. You're basically going to follow down someone else's path that you're, jealous of or inspired by. And that's not your path, It's so the greater acceptance also allows the greatest authenticity, which I think is what we're going for.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'll rush through these last few questions. We got to let you get going here quickly. But you have 3 kids now, I believe it is?
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to parents? This is one Jessica always wants me to ask. What advice would you give to parents to help kids today to be, we'll call it, open-hearted warriors?
I like that. I think staying on the theme, it's allowing them, honoring their emotions. So the other day, I'll give a little example. We're basketball fans, and our middle son is a big fan of the Washington Wizards because my wife is from DC, and the Washington Wizards had lost their playoffs and they were leaving the playoffs. And Evan was just so sad about it, and he was throwing a big tantrum like the Wizards are out. And I was kind of trying to patch the wound, like, yeah, but they'll be back next year, buddy. Like it's it's not, and you know what? And the Warriors are going to play, and the Warriors are our home team. And none of that, it was sort of just all making him more sad. And it also wasn't honoring the fact that it's just sad sometimes when your team leaves. So I tried to flip it, and I said, you know what? Actually, I really do like the Wizards too. And I said, you know what, Evan? It's sad that the Wizards are out, and I just kind of made a sad face. I said, you know what? Do you want to feel sad about that right now? And we both made sad faces. And then we just, we kind of started laughing or tickling about it. And it was like, I had just heard him, I'd heard him and I'd honored that. And I think so often, because I have little kids, all under 6, there's lots of big emotions, and a lot of those emotions are just trying to be heard and like authenticated. And so when you have a hitting or a biting situation, which we have many, it's like, what's underneath that? And can we get to hearing that? Also saying that, you're not a bad person for hitting, but we don't hit. But so it's not like a taking the teeth out of parenting, but it's a still trying to get at, there's an emotion there that needs honoring. Mm-hmm. And so I'm learning that as a parent, as I'm learning it with myself.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. What personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
I love this experience that I'm having, with you right now, where I'm able to connect with somebody on a heart level and be my authentic self. And I think, when I'm sharing that with other people, mm-hmm. It brings me just an incredible amount of happiness and satisfaction. So I'll go with that, of many
Woo-hoo.
things. Woohoo! I'm happy to be here with you, Mike.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And happy to have you here as well, Jaimal. On that note, where can people go to find your beautiful book and to find out more?
Anywhere books are sold, you will find All Our Waves Are Water. It comes out in July. I'm on Facebook and Instagram if you want to follow my updates. I'm doing a national tour in July, hopefully coming to your state. I will be coming to North Carolina, where you are, Michael. And then JaimalYogis.com is my website, where you can also pick up a copy there. It looks like JaimalYogis.com.
Fantastic. And if you didn't catch that, come on over to InspireNationShow.com as well. We'll get you over to Jaimal. Jaimal, any last words of wisdom before we let you go?
I think we did. I covered the homework, so I'll close off there. But it's just been such an honor to be on the show, and I'm a big fan. And thanks for doing it, Michael.
Thank you so much, Jaimal. I support your work. I love what you're doing, and you are you will help challenge me to put myself out there more in the work as well. I think it's so important.
Thanks so much, Michael. Yeah, good luck with the book. Send me a copy, or let me know when I can buy one.
Will do. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get all our waves or water, and stumble towards your own perfect ride, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel, where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, InspireNationShow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much, and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!